Good morning. In any other year, we would traditionally be gathering in this historic gymnasium for Remembrance Day ceremony. It's a long-standing tradition in our school, but with the pandemic, we've adapted, so on November 11th, Remembrance Day, it now marks a full century since the end of fighting in the First World War in November, way back in 1918. We're unable to gather in one room for the ceremony, but I think we're all bound together today, online and in small cohort groups, by grade, to solemnly remember and to mark the legacy and sacrifices of previous generations through the conflict. I'm speaking to you from our school's historic Memorial Gymnasium, and I'm struck today, as I am every year, by lots of different feelings: gratitude, respect, awe, and appreciation of the enormous sacrifices made by earlier generations who were grads of this school and who studied here just like you, and who made enormous sacrifices for all of us. Today, our quiet time together in small groups takes on special meaning as we reflect on the pledge to offer true patriot love and to keep our true north strong and free. We have heard those lines sung hundreds of times in our national anthem. However, today in particular, we're reminded that freedom comes at a cost, an enormous cost, in lives and the destruction that war brought to battlefields, towns, and cities on foreign soil. Normally today, I would welcome many special guests to LCC as part of our extended community, and who like to remember with us together in this gym. But given the pandemic, that's not happening. Instead, I would like today to remember Mr. Alan Canavan from the class of 1939 as a representative of all the LCC alumni veterans. Mr. Canavan gave years of military service to Canada during the Second World War, and following the war, he attended many Remembrance Day services here in our campus, as he visited many classes to share his stories and to take questions from our students. He is only one of many LCC veterans, but in his consistent teaching role, he became a symbol of how important it is to remember. We appreciate his significant contribution to our students' learning about the Great Wars, and he is in our thoughts today as a representative of all who gave service. So students, I believe it's important to remind you every year that this memorial gym where I am standing, where we usually all gather, was built in 1922 to honor all LCC alumni who lost their lives in the First World War. All the funds for this gym came from LCC alumni in honor of their fallen brothers. The formal opening ceremony of this building was held here on a snowy winter evening in February of 1922, and it was presided over by a very significant VIP, the Canadian Governor-General, Byng, who had previously been a general in the Canadian Armed Forces and who had commanded our Canadian troops at the famed Battle of Vimy Ridge in April of 1917, where despite great odds, Canadians were successful, where the French and the British had not been earlier before. The inscription on these impressive plaques over my shoulder, over the oak doors behind me, were unveiled that day in 1922, and the main plaque states the following: "To the glorious memory of the old boys who gave their lives in the Great War, this gym has been erected." And today we think of them, and we consider all the LCC grads who served also in the Second World War and in the Korean conflict. In total, 76 LCC graduates lost their lives. Once again, I urge you to take quiet and personal time during your tenure here at LCC. Come to this gym, stop, look at these plaques, read them, and realize that you have a connection to each one of those young men, your LCC brothers, who had hopes and aspirations and dreams like yours. In total, some 300 LCC grads fought for Canada in the First World War, which was a rather striking number for what was then a rather small school. Today, we honor military personnel from Canada who have honorably served their country and defended the core values we continue to hold most dear today: freedom, equality, rule of law, civility, Also, we should also remember the more than 100 Canadian soldiers who have been killed while on UN peacekeeping missions all across the world since 1957. Among those deeply affected by the horror of the fighting in World War I was John McCrae, a Canadian Army Medical Corps officer who wrote the famous poem In Flanders Fields. He wrote it in 1915, just north of the town of Ypres, and in it, he actually makes references to imagery that have remained very powerful. It is said that he only took about 20 to 30 minutes to scratch it out on a piece of paper while he huddled in a damp and muddy trench. Yet his powerful poem has endured in Canadians' minds and hearts for a full century, and somehow capturing that special sentiment of remembrance that generations of Canadians have deemed very precious, and also making the poppy a striking symbol in Canada and actually now across the world. So today, more than a century after the writing of McCrae's poems, schools and communities across the country will recite In Flanders Field, often throughout Remembrance Week. And in coming together in this way, we're bound closer together in the importance of remembering the sacrifice of previous generations. Close to 10 million people lost their lives in the First World War that raged from 1914 to 1918. Now, more than a full century later, and other countries such as France, the UK, Russia, and others continue to take special measures, like us, to remember the extraordinary scale of human loss. Last June, the world marked the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War and the collapse of the fascist Nazi regime in Germany in May of 1945. Shortly thereafter, the United Nations was established in June of 1945. So this year marks the UN's Diamond Anniversary and warrants thoughtful discussion about the impact and future potential in maintaining the peace and as an organization dedicated to social justice. As time passes, naturally, I think that the realities of these two world wars and the scale of the sacrifice becomes more distant, especially for you, young people of our nation. So taking time today to pause, to reflect with intentionality takes on great meaning as the threads of shared memory become a little bit thinner in our practical day-to-day lives. In fact, I believe that remembering and reflecting actually takes on greater significance every year because of this, especially in an age where more democratic voices are being muffled abroad by autocrats, dictators, and strongmen who find their legitimacy from intimidation and pointing the barrel of a gun. Je crois que c'est important aujourd'hui de noter que le nombre de vétérans canadiens des deux guerres mondiales diminue chaque année. Pendant la Première Guerre mondiale, plus que 600 000 soldats étaient en service du Canada. Plus que 68 000 étaient tués et aujourd'hui, aucun vétéran de la Première Guerre mondiale reste vivant. Pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, plus qu'1 million de soldats étaient en service du Canada, 40 000 étaient tués et moins que 33 000 restent vivants aujourd'hui, avec un âge moyen de 93 ans. Chacun de ces vétérans porte des histoires personnelles importantes dans la vie militaire de leur sacrifice. Finally, we may not be able to gather together this morning or at any point this year, this fall, in one room. But as a community on this Remembrance Day, we are pausing and reflecting together. We are considering the enormous sacrifice of previous generations, the value of living in a country where peace and no armed conflict is our reality. We're thankful for the LCC alumni who made the ultimate sacrifice on our behalf. And remember, they opened windows and doors of opportunity for every single one of us. They should never be forgotten, and they should never be taken lightly. Non nobis solum, not for ourselves alone. Thank you.
World War I, 1914 to 1918. Edgar P. Black, John English Braley, William Brooke, William Erskine Buchan, Reginald Heber Bancroft Buchanan, John Clontarf Kelvin Carson, Reginald Waring Lindsay Crawford, Guy Melfort Drummond, Herrick Stevenson Duggan, Kenneth Locke Duggan, Archer Eakers, Robert Blair Esdale, Bertram St. George French, Robert Anderson Galt, Ralph Gordon Hall, George Cyril Ray Hamilton,
William Mills Hamilton, John Haynes Hannaford, Ivan Charles Kinloch, Edward George Arthur Campbell Lane, Kenneth Mathewson, John Nelson Burdett McKim, Hamnet Eardley Penny, David Benedict Reynoldson, George Vosberg Barker Sayers, Edwin Kerr Skelton, John Elliott Sutherland, Philip Elderton Walker, Harry Webb, Charles Halkett Carson Woods, Kenneth Elgood Young.
World War II, 1939 to 1945. Sidney James Leyland Bailey. John Brooks Beveridge. Massey Williamson Beveridge. James Dalton Bilkey. John Boyer Buckley. Frederick Orchard Cadam. Jeffrey Nigel Carfrey Campbell. Robert Fleetwood Campbell. William Angus Campbell. Jeffrey Lee Caprio. Charles C. Castles. Douglas Horatio Chapman. James Campbell Clutston. Alan Crawford. Ian McMillan Crawford. Robert C. Crawford. Charles Stewart Gibson Crombie. John Terrence Joseph Davis. Douglas George Black Day. Robert Bryson Duncan. William Ewart Nixon Field. George Climie Fraser.
William Graham Brown, Cecil George Hopton, George James Hyman, Bruce Douglas Hindman, David Sinclair Jacobs, Frederick George Johnson, Leslie Warwick Jones, James Morrow Parker, Lyle Basil Berman Price, John H. M. Robertson, Frederick Arthur Scott, Edward David Simon, Thomas Angus McCoy Smith, Frederick William Stewart, Duncan Omni Burleigh Taylor, Hugh Boyd Thornhill, Leo Sarsfield Tobin, James Edward Trow, James Russell Courtney Tyre, Robert White, Richard Oliver Young, Warren Robert Zeller, Korean War, 1950 to 1953, Hugh Ross Cleveland.
For the Fallen by Lawrence Binyon. They went with songs to battle, they were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end, against odds unaccounted, they fell with their faces to the foe. They shall not grow old, as we are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years of condemn. At the going down of the sun in the morning, we shall remember them.
Jour du souvenir par les Beaulieu. En cette belle journée d'amour, nous nous rappelons du jour où les soldats sont partis en bataille pour leur pays. Nous nous rappelons de ceux qui ont sacrifié leur vie et qui sont partis vers Dieu, et tout ça pour leur pays. En cette journée, nous pensons à ce qu'ils ont fait pour nous et dans nos cœurs nous gardons une mémoire d'amour de tous. À ceux qui sont encore en vie, ils sont de personnes bien aimées, ils sont de vrais héros remplis de paix, d'amour et d'amitié. À tous ceux qui ont donné leur vie précieuse si aimée, je les vois comme des amis et je les en remercie.